Something already happened before this video, before you found these words. Something shifted quietly, without announcement, without the dramatic turning point you probably imagined it would require. And the proof of it is that they are different now. Something in how they move toward you, something in the quality of their attention, something that was not there before, or was there in such a muted form that it barely registered, and is now unmistakably present. You did the thing that felt impossible. You stopped. Not dramatically, not with a speech or an ultimatum or a performance of indifference. You simply stopped chasing, stopped reorganizing yourself around their distance, stopped sending the signal that said, "I will always be here, regardless of how little you offer." And something in that stopping has produced a consequence you may not have fully let yourself believe in. They feel it deeply, in the way that avoidants feel things. Not loudly, not with immediate fluency, but in the slow, cellular, undeniable way that real feeling moves through a system that was built to suppress it. It got through anyway. You got through. And now something is happening in them that they were not prepared for. This is what that actually is, what it means, and what you do with it now. First, understand the specific mechanics of what your not chasing did to their internal world. The avoidant had a prediction. It was not always conscious. Sometimes it lived entirely below the level of articulate thought, but it was running. A background assumption that you would pursue, that the pattern would continue as it had been established, that regardless of how much distance they created, your orbit would remain stable around them, that the architecture of the dynamic, them receding, you reaching, was a fixed feature of the relational landscape rather than a choice you were making that could, at any point, be unmade. This assumption was not malicious, it was structural, built from the accumulated evidence of how the relationship had operated. Every time you had reached before, every time you had softened after they withdrew, every time the silence broke because you broke it, all of that data went into a model, and the model said, "This person will always move toward me. The distance is safe. The distance is affordable. Nothing real is at risk." Your not chasing broke the model. Not gradually, sharply, the way a structure sounds different the moment a load-bearing element has shifted. The avoidance internal map of who you are and how you behave suddenly had a piece of data that did not fit. You were supposed to reach. You did not reach. And the system that had been operating on the certainty of your pursuit found itself running the calculation again, from the beginning, with different inputs. What happens in the avoidance nervous system when the expected pursuit does not arrive is not immediate. This matters because the timeline of their realization is almost certainly different from what you imagined it would be. There is an initial period, the length of which varies enormously depending on the depth of the pattern and the strength of their deactivating strategies, where the absence of your pursuit is experienced as relief. This is the honest, uncomfortable truth of it. The part of the avoidance system that created the distance in the first place registers your withdrawal as the environment finally matching its preference. The pressure lifted, the activation quieted. And in that quiet, the deactivating strategies produce their familiar narrative. This confirms that space was needed, that the distance was right, that independence feels better than the weight of that closeness. Let that land without it meaning what it might feel like it means, because what comes after that relief is where everything actually lives. The deactivating strategies have a design flaw. They were built to manage the presence of attachment, to suppress and redirect the feeling when closeness activates it. What they were not designed for is the sustained absence of the attachment figure. The strategies can quiet the feeling when you are there and pressing. They cannot generate meaning when you are gone, and the specific texture of your absence becomes a permanent feature of the environment. Days pass. The relief that came from the initial quiet begins to lose its flavour. The space that was craved reveals its actual contents, which are not freedom exactly, but a particular kind of emptiness that wears freedom's clothes. The ordinary moments of the day that used to carry in the background the awareness of you, your attention, your investment, the specific quality of being known by you. Those moments now carry a different background, one that takes longer to name, but eventually names itself. Lack. Not dramatic, not acute at first. A quiet, persistent register of something missing, something specific. Not the abstract longing for connection that could be satisfied by any number of things, but the particular absence of you, your specific presence. The irreplaceable quality of being seen by someone who knew where to look. And this specificity is what defeats the deactivating strategies entirely, because the strategies can dismiss a generalized longing. They can redirect an abstract need. What they cannot do is argue convincingly against the specific, embodied, memory-laden absence of a particular person who occupied a particular space in the interior landscape. The mind that tries to run the minimization algorithm. This was not that serious. I am better this way. The relationship had too many problems. Finds itself running it against specific memories that refuse to be minimized. Against the recollection of something that was genuinely good. Against the knowledge, arriving now with a clarity that was unavailable when the relationship was in its normal, activated state. That what was there was real and is now gone. Here is what is happening in them right now, in the actual present tense of their interior. Something has reorganized. The feeling that was running underground, managed, suppressed, redirected for the duration of the relationship, has surfaced into a space that the deactivating strategies can no longer adequately patrol. And surfaced feeling, in someone who spent years learning to contain it, does not arrive quietly or in manageable doses. It arrives with the force of everything that was held back. The depth of what they feel right now is not proportional to how much they showed while things were active between you. It is proportional to how much was actually there, running beneath the surface, never fully permitted into expression. And that proportion is almost always larger than the behavior suggested. The performance of indifference was never a measure of the actual investment. It was a measure of the capacity to suppress the actual investment. What you are witnessing, in whatever form their change is arriving, whether subtle or sudden, whether in words or in a quality of presence that was not available before, is suppressed feeling finding its way to the surface now that the conditions that kept it suppressed have shifted. Your not chasing shifted the conditions. Your absence changed the pressure gradient, and the feeling is moving in the direction that pressure differentials always move things, from high containment toward open air. There is something you need to understand about the depth of feeling the title is pointing toward. Because depth of feeling in an avoidant is not the same thing as readiness, and conflating the two is one of the most common and most painful mistakes made in this particular moment. The depth is real. Genuinely real. The feeling that is surfacing, the recognition of your value, the specific quality of missing you, the awareness that what they had and managed carelessly was something that cannot simply be replaced or dismissed. That is not performance. It is not a tactic. It is the actual interior experience of someone whose containment has finally been exceeded by the weight of what was being contained. But the feeling existing does not automatically produce the capacity to act on it differently than before. The same nervous system that generated the pattern is the one now experiencing the feeling. The same architecture exists. The same deactivating tendencies, the same activation responses, the same learned associations between closeness and threat. All of that is still present. The feeling has grown louder. The system has not yet grown different. This is the most important distinction in the entire landscape of what you are navigating right now. What does it mean for you, practically and emotionally, that they have deep feelings, but the architecture remains? It means that the return of their warmth, the reaching, the presence, the suddenly available version of them that you always knew existed, is not a destination, it is an opening. A genuine one, but an opening nonetheless. And openings can be walked through into something genuinely different, or they can be walked through back into the same room you already spent time in. Which one happens is not determined by the depth of their feeling. It is determined by what both of you do with the opening. For them, doing something with it means the willingness to examine the pattern with honest eyes. Not just to feel the loss and respond to the loss and reach back toward you from inside the loss, but to look at the mechanism that produced the loss in the first place. To sit with the uncomfortable recognition that the distance was a choice, even if a compelled one. That the management was a strategy, even if an unconscious one. That you were treated as affordable to lose in moments when the fear was running the system. And that preventing the repetition of that treatment requires something more than feeling bad about it. For you, doing something with the opening means receiving their return without collapsing back into the previous configuration. Allowing the warmth to land, responding to the genuine feeling with genuine feeling, and simultaneously, not as a strategy, but as the lived expression of who you have become, maintaining the self you found in their absence, the groundedness, the center of gravity that now lives in you rather than in the relationship, the value they are realizing. Let's be specific about what that actually is, from inside their experience. It is not a general appreciation for your positive qualities, which they were aware of before. It is something more precise, more unsettling to them. It is the recognition that the specific thing you provided, the quality of your attention, the particular safety of your regard, the specific experience of being known by you, is not reproducible, cannot be found elsewhere and cannot be internally generated, cannot be approximated by the relief of independence or the comfort of self-sufficiency. There is a category of thing whose value only becomes fully legible in its absence. Your presence was in that category. Not because you failed to demonstrate your value while you were there, but because the avoidant system, while it was in active defense mode, could not receive the demonstration. The appreciation was blocked by the same machinery that blocked the closeness. And now that the machinery is running differently, now that the suppression has been exceeded by the weight of your specific absence, the value is arriving with a clarity that was structurally impossible before. This is why you could not have produced this realization by staying, by reaching harder, by being more available or more patient or more demonstrably loving. The realization required your absence, not because your presence was insufficient, but because the avoidance system required the contrast in order to compute the value. It required the experience of your presence as something that can end in order to register it as something that mattered. Now, something specifically for you, because you carried something through this that deserves to be named. The not chasing was not easy. Do not let anyone, including yourself, flatten it into a simple decision cleanly executed. It was a daily, sometimes hourly, renegotiation with the part of yourself that wanted to reach, that had grown accustomed to reaching, that had organized its sense of relational safety around the act of pursuit and found, when the pursuit stopped, a disorienting silence where the activity used to be. You held that silence. You stayed in your own life when every conditioned impulse said to close the distance. You trusted, perhaps without fully believing it, perhaps through gritted teeth and enormous uncertainty, that the withdrawal of your pursuit was the most honest thing available to you. Not a tactic, a truth. The truth that what was being offered was insufficient, and you were no longer arranging yourself around insufficiency. That held. That is the thing they are responding to. Not a performance of strength, but the actual presence of someone who returned to themselves, who stopped waiting for someone else's readiness to determine the shape of their days, who found, in the space that the reaching used to occupy, the particular and irreplaceable texture of their own life. That is what became irresistible. Not because irresistibility was the goal, because it is what genuine self-possession looks like from the outside to a nervous system that has been organized its entire life around protecting the self. There are things that are worth feeling right now without immediately resolving them. The vindication of having held the boundary, the grief of what it costs to hold it, The complicated relief of their return, mixed with the very legitimate uncertainty about what the return actually means and whether it will produce something different this time. The part of you that wants to believe fully and the part of you that has information, real experiential information about the pattern and its tendency to replicate. All of those things can coexist. In fact, they must coexist if you are going to navigate this moment with the clarity it requires. The desire to collapse into certainty, either the certainty that this time is different or the certainty that it will repeat, is the desire to escape the complexity of the actual situation. And the actual situation is genuinely complex, genuinely uncertain, genuinely requiring of your most grounded, most honest, most self-respecting engagement. The question that sits at the center of all of this: what do you want? Not what do you want them to feel? Not what outcome would feel like validation for what you went through. What do you actually want for your own life, in the clearest and most honest terms you can access right now? If what you want is the person, the actual, complicated, architecturally avoidant, genuinely feeling, pattern-carrying person, then the feeling they now have is real, and it is something to work with. The opening is real. The possibility of something different is real, if both of you are genuinely willing to build something different rather than resume something familiar. If what you want is a life that does not carry the specific weight of this dynamic, the hypervigilance, the temperature reading, the particular exhaustion of loving someone whose system is organized against receiving love, then their depth of feeling, while real, is not sufficient reason to return. Depth of feeling does not automatically translate into capacity for different behaviour, and capacity for different behaviour is the only thing that changes the outcome. Whatever you choose it from here, from the ground you found when the chasing stopped, from the self that continued, expanded, clarified, increasingly its own, while they were running the deactivating strategies, and you were rebuilding the life that had quietly contracted around their needs. They see your value now, clearly and deeply, and in the specific, irreplaceable way that absence teaches what presence obscured. But your value was never in question, not for a single day of the distance, not for a single moment of their management or minimization or strategic indifference. Your value existed in full, continuous, undiminished form through every bit of it. The only thing that changed is their ability to see it. And their ability to see it is about them. What you do with being seen, finally, fully, with the depth that was always warranted, is entirely, completely, only about you. Choose accordingly. Choose from the center. That is the only place from which any of this makes sense.